You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with your hosts, Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on!
Mike Sempervive here with you, Wrestling Observer Live. Just woke up. You one of those ASMR kids? Here's Red Bull. Opening. Peach nectarine. Everybody's on those Bang energy drinks. If you've seen this, your favorite wrestler, odds are, on the indie scene, because they're more open to tweeting and Instagramming things that they're not getting paid by. So you see a lot of them hyping the Bang energy drinks. They're good. Not as good as this. Stalling here. Wrestling Observer Live. Producer Don behind the glass. Make him work today. 1-800-878-PLAY. 1-800-878-7529. You can get a hold of me on Twitter as well. At Sempervive. At WONF4W, which is all you need for everything professional wrestling and mixed martial arts and Sports Byline USA. Bunch of fine accounts to follow on Twitter. What's on your mind today? I'd like to hear it. I watched the Vice documentaries, did you? I've seen 3 of them so far. I don't know if these things are as good as hyped. They're slick, they're sharp. I appreciate seeing documentaries. I've seen far worse. Some of those A&E documentaries in the 90s and things like that. The evolution of these things has come along great. I'd like to see them take more cracks at it. But I'm underwhelmed so far, especially by the one from Montreal last night that has gotten a lot of people talking. It's been 20-something years now, and it 20 whatever. It's been a long time. It's still a mess. So is Scott Hall talking about everything and believing that it's still a work. If you've seen these, what do you think? And if you haven't seen them, or even if you haven't seen them, what wrestling stories out there that you'd like to see be made into documentaries? There's a lot of them. Chris Adams' story, Tommy Rich's 7-day title reign, there'd be a zillion things. What do you want to see taken on instead of the same old things like the Montreal Screwjob? Let me know. Wrestling Observer Live.
It's a new day. Yes, it is.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
It is a new day. Tomorrow's a new day, too. It's Friday tomorrow. Guess what? Boss is back. He's really never left. If you're a subscriber to WrestlingObserver.com, you've been treated to solo Brian shows on vacation, where he has locked himself in a small bathroom and recorded shows by cutting promos on the Superstar Shakeup in bad continuity on WWE TV. But if you're not a subscriber and you've been sitting here freeloading, well, you may get a little of that vented to you come tomorrow. Welcome him back to Bossman. And it may be a new day, but we've got the same old documentary stories. Montreal Screwjob on Vice. Like I said, very slick. Very slick, very good. If you've listened to Jim Cornette's show, the Jim Cornette Experience, he's talked about how excited he has been for this. I knew he's come out with a new one today talking about, I guess, everything about his experience in recording it and doing everything. It was another Montreal documentary. And if you're listening to this show, odds are you are probably well aware that Dave Meltzer has written a lot on this subject, including a lot, given to him firsthand by people that were there. And he talks a little bit about that actually in this week's newsletter as well, talking about how Bruce Pritchard was one of the first people to contact him after everything went down, and a whole lot of other stuff. And like I said, it was slick, it was well produced, it was well done, but it was nothing that you haven't seen before, nothing that you hadn't heard before, in all likelihood, unless you are around the age of maybe 20 and younger. Just was okay. The Bruiser Brody one, I think, was really good. The Macho Man one, again, I don't think we're breaking any new ground here. That said, I do understand why they have done these and why these were the first ones greenlit to get done, I guess. It's Randy Savage. I don't know if... Look at the reaction. There were a lot of people that were just jaw on the floor, shocked and stunned when Randy Savage passed away. I mean, even a lot of us who are hardcore wrestling fans who grew up with Randy Savage, who, the character is such an important part of our childhood sort of thing. I mean, even a lot of us were really surprised at the reaction that his passing got. So, it's a story that will cross over. So I absolutely get it. This Montreal one, same way. The way it was, they could do a second Montreal documentary off the back of this one if they so chose. Because there's still a lot to tell, and there's still things that you can weave in and out of it. So I guess I get it there, too. But are there any stories that you want to hear told that you haven't seen written yet? They're going to do one on Gino Hernandez. That's the one I've really been waiting for. And I think that's one a lot of people have really been waiting for because it does promise some new information. There really wasn't any new information in the Montreal one. The only new information may be that Jim Cornette is more open to taking the weight of he's the one that put the idea in Vince's head to go ahead and pull the trigger on. Even though he says he didn't expect it to happen or know it was going to happen, he was the one who did it. Which, of course, leads into Vince Russo in the documentary and he and Jim Cornette going back and forth, which some people love, some people are way more than tired of now. In the Bruiser Brody documentary, there really wasn't anything new there either. Although I don't know if I've heard Dutch Mantell. I didn't read any of Dutch's books, unfortunately, and I heard they're great, and I do need to get them. But I don't think I've heard him talk in as much detail as he did. I think, if I recall correctly, I heard everything Atlas had to say and things like that. But there was nothing really that groundbreaking there either. But when it comes to the documentary on Gino Hernandez, we do have some things asked and answered. And being able to talk to Gino's mom and a lot of that stuff, that's awesome. So I'm really looking forward to that one. But as a side story to that, one story that I would love to see, and it's unfortunate because Gary Hart has passed away, although if you can go back and use his commentaries and some of the things he has said on shoot interviews, whether it be with Sean Oliver or, the other guys' interviews or any of that sort of stuff, anything that could be out there, Gary Hart would be great, but unfortunately he's not there. But being able to use some of that stuff, I think that's a story. I think you can make pretty cool stories out of Baba, a story about him buying the NWA title reigns and things like that, those short negotiated title reigns. The Tommy Rich one would be an interesting story. Anything tied in with Dusty Rhodes, anything Dusty Rhodes at all, I think would probably make a pretty good story. But interested to see, what you think would actually make some pretty good stories. We go back to the phones, or go to the phones now. 1-800-878-PLAY. Nick in Vermont. Nick, how are you?
Not too bad, Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
Not doing too bad. What's on your mind today?
I wanted to talk the Viceland documentaries. I've actually really been enjoying them. I've seen the Macho, the Montreal, and the Brody, and I think the Brody has been my favorite thus far.
Am I being too hard on them as far as because again, I think they've been extremely well done, but I don't think they have been as dynamic as they have been hyped to be. Am I being a little bit too hard on them and not looking at this and the fact that it's made as much for new eyes as it is for older ones?
I think when it comes to Brody, it's different because you're getting point of views from Dutch and Abdullah, and I don't ever recall hearing Abdullah, but Montreal and Macho, those have been beaten to death, and I gotta admit, I kind of laughed when I saw Vince Russo going back claiming he was the one who created the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah, that's and I like him pointing out that he was not originally scheduled for the documentary, but bro, he was there and he just had to put his 2 cents in. I will say this. As watching it, you see how what Vince Russo says about how he came up with it and pitched it to Vince, and then you have how Jim Cornette did it, which was going back into the annals and the Rolodex of his mind and going to Strangler Lewis and Henri Deglaine and the famous double cross in Montreal there. And I will say this: if one was going to be based on something, I would probably tend to believe Cornette in this, but. What do you think about what Cornette said, and do you believe that he was the one who really put the idea in Vince's head?
I believe that. Cornette's a smart guy. I listen to his podcast. I know how smart he is when it comes to old wrestling like that. Besides the rest of the documentaries coming out, I'm more looking forward to Gino and the Von Erichs, and I don't know about you, but one I'd love to see him do was Chris Benoit, because that one always intrigued me because I'd only been a wrestling fan a couple of years, and after seeing Chris on TV, and then that happening is just like mind-blowing.
Yeah, Nick, I want to thank you very much for the call. It is one, and it's not one that a lot of wrestling fans would want to revisit and won't feel good about. But that is a documentary that probably, I don't know if it should be told or if it's time for it to be told again, but for somebody to take that story and really take an all-encompassing look from all sides and get all opinions and all takes on it, if done well, I think could be really good. If done poorly, could be as exploitive and slimy and depressing as one would believe it could be. Hopefully the show's not doing that to you. We'll keep it going when we get back from break. Wrestling Observer Live. Sean Radican is really annoying on Twitter. But like any broken clock, he occasionally is worth looking at twice a day at the right time. And he does say that end zone casts are not scheduled for any upcoming ROH dates and are not part of any ROH plans after that angle with the Briscoes at G1 Supercard. New Japan was not aware any of those guys were going to be on the show. Most people in ROH were not aware anybody was going to be on the show, and the fans certainly were not aware that end zone casts were going to be on the show. This is all probably for the best. Although I know there are some of you out there that really want to see the Briscoes beat up Enzo. There's still time, I guess. Hopefully End Zone Cast don't show up at the Crockett Cup. I don't think that they will. It's coming up here next Sunday. I wish I could actually make it down to North Carolina for that one. I love that. I'm still kicking myself all these years later that I didn't get a chance to go to the Crockett Cup in Baltimore. It's the second one today. Really not for the Crockett Cup itself, even though that would have been awesome because I was always a big fan of tag team wrestling, especially random teams coming in from other territories that I was not as familiar with. It was really because of the comeback of Magnum TA. And I know there have been some documentaries and smaller things done on Magnum TA, but that's a story that I would love to see. Hard to really that whole time, all of 1985 into 86 in Crockett would be a great documentary. As big as like the World Class blow up was in like 82 and this place here and that place there, Crockett 85 and 86. Whew. With the Rock and Roll Express, with Magnum TA, with Dusty Rhodes, with the Road Warriors, the Russians, Ric Flair, the Horse. I mean, it's a ridiculous, an unbelievable array of talent. And how those baby faces touched those people down there, that would be huge. Looking on Twitter, some of the stories that you would like to see covered. The steroid trial, it keeps coming up. Jimmy Snuka and the Nancy Argentino story keeps coming up, much like the Chris Benoit one. Would make for a great documentary, if not a feel-good one. Kendall Matthews, the Funk Family Dynasty. Sam Mushnick in the St. Louis Glory days. Boy, Larry Madison passing. Although, again, if somebody is out there willing to do the work, he has done so much audio, not only on our site, but on other people's sites, and has been so open and so helpful in talking to people that I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff out there that if a filmmaker or a documentarian wanted to acquire it or attempt to use it, it's out there. The All Japan Noah split from Mike on Twitter, that's a good one. Rufino Unchained, right up my alley with this one. Black Saturday. The Briscoes, Jerry Briscoe would be a good one for this. The selling of the shares of stock and the maneuvering that went around there with the Paul Jones stock and the Barnett stock and all that sort of stuff. Everything that went on there and that move. Not that Tom Green, Murray Hodgson. Not necessarily the scandal, just his story as a con man. Art Barr's Life and Death, as well as Jimmy Snuka and Nancy. Wow, another one. Raj is like Mid-South sale to Crockett. That's 2 of them now for that one. Kendall Matthews, why the UWF Mid-South really went out of business, and Raj backing that one up too, along with Mr. Perfect's death. All Japan Women of the 90s. Vince's true tactics in buying all the territories. And Eddie Guerrero. Good solo story there. That actually, the story of the Guerreros concentrating on Eddie, I think would be a really good one. That would be a really, really interesting story. Get to some more of the Twitter ones here in a little bit, but we'll head back to the phone lines now. If you want to join me, you can. What are some documentaries you would love to see made on wrestling stories? 1-800-878-PLAY. Jack in D.C. Jack, what's up?
Nothing necessarily comes to mind as far as documentaries, although the Eddie Guerrero one focused around Eddie with the whole family. That would be amazing. I hadn't thought of that until just now. But the reason I call is I'm not really sure what's going on with the Drifter in WWE right now. His character seems to be very unique in that he gets a lot of TV time, and some of the main segments are focused around him. Yet they don't seem to be putting him in any matches or paying off all the heat he's getting. I'm not sure. Do you think that he's going to be a perennial non-wrestler involved in getting other people over? Or do you think that they're slowly trying to build him up as a wrestler along the way? Because it seems silly to me that waste TV time on somebody that is not really going to cut it in terms of putting on great matches. I don't know. Have you thought about that?
It came up. I was thinking about it last night when I was listening to Dave and Brian's show when they were talking about the fact that coming up here on the Loop, the main event for those SmackDown shows are going to be Elias against Roman Reigns. And as Brian has pointed out on this show and others, he has seen that match, and the match is not very good. And I think anybody that has seen it has seen really any Elias match. They're not going to be very good because he's really not all that good. But kept in short situations with higher profile guys, it works. My thing is just, how long does this continue to work for, where he's the guy that comes out and sings and you never see him in matches against anybody else, but he just gets dropped by the stars, and he just is like the interlude who gets beat up. And it's weird, because he's not a guy that I want to see wrestle per se, but as a character and as a personality, he's so big. It's such a big and it's such a good act to me that I kind of want to see him there. I don't know exactly what you do. Do you program him against somebody where he can, quote, learn to work and things like that? Or do you just keep trying to take advantage of the fact that he gets such a big reaction? So when he gets, lariated or speared or punched by Roman Reigns, that's enough for everybody. I don't know, and I don't know how long this works for. I mean, is he somebody that you think is really? Do you think he'll develop into somebody that you want to see in the mix all the time? I mean, he may be, but just be better off being used the way he's at.
Personally, I don't really want to see him, in wrestling matches that last more than 2 minutes, because the ones with Bobby Lashley where he just, did the job 2 weeks in a row were pretty abysmal. And I know it was Bobby Lashley, but still, he just doesn't have that. He just doesn't have that ability to make me want to get into his matches. And I do think that he's entertaining, but for them to waste so much time and put him in main event segments seems a little silly. But then again, he probably does have that look that Vince loves, and they probably want to take advantage of his, talking and entertainment. But to me, I wouldn't waste so much time on him. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but...
Well, Jack, I want to thank you very much for the call. No, and he's one of those things. It's just he's a character that, like, it's hard. I'm sorry, it's hard not to like it. I know there's probably the diehard old school, head and chinlock wrestling fans that have no time for him. I got time for him. I don't know what the answer is exactly. Him in the main event mix is troubling. It really is. Him as a main event personality isn't. I get it. Him with main event sized arms, with that guitar. Vince loves that, I'm sure. The presence is there, all that stuff's there. But yeah, him in the mix all the time is not good. Him playing songs and getting interrupted and getting dropped for a big pop, cool. And I think if you continue to do that, that's great. If you continue to try to do both with him, I think neither, it's just not going to work for either side. We'll keep it with the phone lines now. John in Arkansas. John, what's up?
Hey, Mike. I've got to echo part of what you were just discussing here. I mean, he's got his place, but I don't think that we need to concentrate as much time as they have been giving him. There are quite a few talents that I think that are just, they over-rely on. They don't really give anything to the show and have any substance behind them, so why would you concentrate on them? As far as the stories about the Vice thing, I was thinking maybe Eddie Graham in the Florida Territory would be a good one. I'd kind of like to hear a little bit more about some of that. I liked the mentions of Black Saturday and kind of how the whole Georgia thing went down with Vince getting a hold of that. Maybe somebody should delve into some of the predatory business practices of which he orchestrated to get his stronghold on things.
There's a lot of predatory business practices I think a lot of people would like to get into with Vince McMahon. But, John, I want to thank you very much for the call. I got the music on here. I'll be going to break. I want to get your thoughts on some stories that Vice could be telling. Get back on Wrestling Observer Live.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Back on the show, and if you're listening live right now, bottom of the eighth, Washington Nationals 4, San Francisco Giants 1. That was for Producer Dom. If you want to say hi to Producer Dom, you can. 1-800-878-PLAY. 1-800-878-7529. You know how it goes with me. You can pretty much talk about whatever you want. I like to talk. I like to listen. But one thing that has come up, what documentaries would you like to see Vice do or anyone do? What interesting wrestling stories would you like to hear? We've heard Montreal a zillion and one times. Heard about Andre the Giant a zillion and one times. Great stories. What else do you want to hear? The story of Rikidozan, says Anthony Kennedy. Also adds in All Japan Women, covering the Beauty Pair and the Crush Girls. He'd also like to see the Battle for Georgia done with Ann Gunkel. Yes. It's another good one. Now that is you're going to be you better be a big wrestling fan for that one. But the All-South split would be fascinating. I think with what was discovered and has been talked about a lot on the Ron Fuller Studcast over on the Arcadian Vanguard Network. Also, by the way, houses the Jim Cornette shows as well, too. That stuff and what's been revealed about the Knoxville 5, I would love to hear stories about that, because just the whole, what could have been. I mean, you think about the role that Bob Orton Jr. played throughout the 80s, and his presence with Roddy Piper and him being paired with Roddy Piper, I mean, throughout Piper's time blowing up with WrestleMania into WrestleMania 3 and WrestleMania 2, Boxing Bob with Mr. T, and then into WrestleMania 3 when he turned on Piper and was aligned with Adrian Adonis and was rocking the pink cowboy hat. And even before that, what he was doing in Mid-Atlantic, the team with Dick Slater injuring Ric Flair leading into Starrcade 83. Because Starrcade 83 would be a hell of a story. I don't want to digress. I'll keep it on Orton. But, like, just his presence, his father, how this would have affected him, a legendary figure. Bob Orton, at the, famously with Eddie Graham, it was a huge star in Florida. I'd love to see how those stories all played in and what could have been with some of those guys, with Ronnie Garvin, who ended up becoming an NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Just what could have actually been and what did actually go on. There's still a lot of story to be told there for a hardcore wrestling fan. The Great CDN Talk Show, I guess that would be the Great Canadian Talk Show now, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. George Gordienko being banished in the McCarthy era. Fascinating. The influx of gringos into Mexico in the late 80s, early 90s with Dory Dixon still around to give advice to the boys. I'll if you want to do that, I'd be all for it, especially with a focus on Dory Dixon's career, which is pretty amazing. Really amazing. In fact, somebody should do that. In fact, the next time Dr. Lucha is on, and I don't know if he's going to be on tomorrow or not because I'm taking a day off with Bossman back. But if he is, I'll throw that one out there. The Life and Times of John Tenta. Also from Great Canadian. B.J. Bethel, The Death of Bruiser Brody. Well, we've got that. Although, and really, I don't know. I guess you could take different looks at it if you wanted to. I just don't know how you could. The only way you could is to have some people in Puerto Rico, other than Savio Vega, talk about it. And I don't know if we're really going to get any other different answers than we would otherwise. Carlos Colon did a shoot interview at one point where he just kind of threw his hands up and He also adds Mass Transit, not a fun story. In the Lifetimes of Hayabusa, not bad. Guillermo Jose Santiago, Abismo Negro. That's I'm out on that one. I don't know. But there are a ton of stories you can tell. Go back to the phones now, 1-800-878-PLAY. Jim in Virginia. Jim, how are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing today, Mike?
Not too bad. I got a question for you. If you had to see one documentary of a women's wrestler, of one woman, of all the history of pro wrestling, from Penny Banner to Alexa Bliss, who is the one woman superstar that you said that woman needs a documentary telling me everything I need to know about them?
Without a doubt, Sarah Del Rey.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, she's in the right place for production and good-looking documentaries, because that is one thing that WWE can excel at when they want to. And she does certainly have a hell of a story, and is going to be one that would make for a fantastic network special one day if they ever so choose. But really, so more than anybody else, Sarah Del Rey, good on you.
Exactly.
What else is on your mind today, Jim?
Okay. You were talking about the different shows and biographies you would like to see done. I think a great one would be UWF. Because UWF, pound for pound, had the best bunch of stuff, mint of talent that of any of these the groups out there.
Absolutely. That UWF was, famously for me, one of my favorite. Jim, well, thank you very much for the call. One of my favorite promotions of all time. I mean, it was great. And if you are a fan of the WWE Network, and you have the WWE Network, they have just uploaded a bunch of 1984 and 85 Mid-South, and as I said on, I believe it was Sunday, that was pretty much what it says, godliness. It really was. And from that time on through, early 86 into 86, before they started getting slowly plucked away, losing Butch Reed. Forget about losing Dog. When they started losing Duggan, and they lost DiBiase, and then they lost Butch Reed, and they lost this guy and that guy, and one-man gang, and it was impossible to keep up. It's impossible to keep up. And there were a lot of reasons that the company faltered and needed to be sold to Crockett, but and the story of the selling to Crockett and how Bill Watts was able to, I don't want to say that Bill Watts and Jim Ross fleeced Jim Crockett, but how territories were, Jim Crockett going out and buying all those territories would make for an interesting story too. The Accountant, I'd love to see a documentary made on that, because that was the biggest, maybe one of the biggest things that in hindsight people forget about all those acquisitions that Jim Crockett made, is the fact that they didn't have to be made. St. Louis and Central States and the Florida Territory and Mid-South and all of these other places that Vince McMahon just would have waited to die and then, scoop up all the remains. The money that was spent on all that stuff. Yeah, wasted. Go back to the phones now. Marcelo in Denver. Marcelo, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Mike?
Not too bad. Sorry I couldn't get to you yesterday. What's on your mind today?
No problem, man. So, two things. First, for your question today, man, I honestly, even though the story's still going on, like a documentary about Tony Schiavone, I feel like would be actually kind of compelling. Somebody who took a break from what was essentially the height of the wrestling business and like kind of slowly making his way back.
And in a way, that's, everybody loves a good redemption story. And Tony, I think, was unfairly maligned for a long time and was the face of death, of the death of WCW. And that'll put butts in the seats and all that sort of stuff. And what gets forgotten about is there are people like me who grew up literally as Tony Schiavone grew up in the wrestling business and caught him when he was an announcer with the Charlotte Orioles, and then got to see him grow and got to see him fall spectacularly, and now got to see him claw himself back. And yeah, I mean, he has really rebuilt his reputation, even though it was one that maybe shouldn't have been damaged as bad as it was in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think that actually is a redemption story. That would be actually kind of cool for him to hear.
Oh, yeah. No, agree, man. And then my only other thing was I had an idea to kind of make the shakeup a little more interesting, was that if they incorporated Survivor Series into it, where depending on who won the brand, who won the match for their brand, like they would get a draft pick, since the shakeup is nothing more than just a mini draft.
I would love that. I would love anything to spice that thing up. Anything they could do to spice that thing up. I would make pay-per-view matches. Yeah, I would love to see that. That type of thought process, Marcelo, thank you very much for the call. That type of interest put into, and I know that they're hiring I don't know if they've hired one yet, a continuity editor. But Jesus Christmas, used to see these, and it's not the same as it was back in the day, but I would still love to see WrestleMania built to in a little bit more of a traditional way, where all of these stories that you're having can weave together. And by the time WrestleMania or Royal Rumble rolls around, that was the one thing too with like the 80s and Crockett, when things are usually good with a promotion. I mean, often you way too often get a case like we got with Kofi, where everybody on the show mentions Kofi. The same way back in the day, everybody on the show would mention Dusty, or whatever the big angle at the time was, somebody would mention it, whether it was Ole turning dirty or, the fire getting thrown in Ronnie Garvin's face or whatever it is, everybody would talk about that story. And sometimes it would be annoying, especially if they were talking about Dusty. But when those things would weave in and out, it's like it would create tension and all this interest and stuff like that. And you could build towards WrestleMania and build towards the days after, where you have the superstar shakeup. They should do this every year. I like this concept if they would actually do something with it. And putting, riders on matches where, hey, you will get a first pick if you win this, or you can get some sort of brand swag for, accomplishing something. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. It's like the baseball all-star game. Now you win that, you get home field advantage at the World Series. I mean, give somebody something. But then again, I like sports. So that may be the issue. Got another choice from Isosceles Jones from Mass Transit. Dynamite Kid's another one as well, too. The Dynamite Kid, again, put that in the bag of not-so-fun stories, but stories that could be told. Running out of time on today, but I want to get to this last caller, Ned in Pawcatuck. Did I get that right, my friend, Pawcatuck?
You got it right again.
What's happening, my man?
How are you feeling today?
I've successfully made it through the week. I forget how many shows it's been and how many days, but I'm doing okay.
Just keep taking your vitamins, saying your prayers.
That's all you can do, my man. What's on your mind?
First things first. Did I hear this right? You took a train up to New York for the New Japan show?
Yes.
See, I had this image of you like driving up there in an El Camino, or maybe Mance Warner swinging by from the Bucksnort, Tennessee. Maybe two of you driving up there, drinking some Nitty Lights, throwing on like street signs or something.
I would have jumped in that ride if it was offered to me, but he was already up there. I only came up that Saturday. He was already killing people in MLW by the time I got there.
Quick thing, by the way, I don't think anyone's mentioned it to you. If you have not seen yet the Invisible Man versus Invisible Stan match from the Janela's show first night, you got to see it.
Ned, I got to go to break. I got to go to break, but you know what? I absolutely agree with you, and Bryce Remsburg was awesome in that match. He was the star of that match. But we got to go to break. We'll be back. Wrestling Observer Live. I hate I had to cut Ned off like that. Bryce Remsburg during that match was something else. Absolutely something else. Somebody needs to do a documentary of Jim Cornette watching that match for some reaction. Producer Dom during the break had a good one. WrestleMania 1. If WrestleMania 1 didn't work, we would probably not be talking about the WWE as we do right now. Maybe we would be. But everything went perfect for Vince, and money was made, and that company was saved. But remember, this was the guy selling the WTBS time slot for $1 million to Jim Crockett because he needed the money. But one thing about Jim Crockett buying WTBS and that time slot, he didn't do it before Vince got every last bit of promotion he could get out of it for WrestleMania. Save the company. Brian's coming back to save this show. In the last 16 days, we've done 14 shows. 12 of those shows have been solo. I know you're sick of me. So I'm going to take the day off because I could use some sleep. And Brian Alvarez, right back from beautiful, sunny Hawaii, will be all ready to go. I don't know if Dr. Lucha Steve Sims will be here tonight or tomorrow or not, but Brian definitely will be. I want to thank all of you for texting in this week, for giving me calls this week. Thank producer Dom, producer Scott, producer Brian even. All y'all. Appreciate it very much. My name is Mike Sempervive. Probably be back with you on Monday because I don't think we're doing anything on Easter. Until then, I will talk to you again.
Keep enjoying Smoky Mountain Wrestling here on WKAY, Channel 64 in the Charlotte-Kannapolis, North Carolina area. We're coming soon for Smoky Mountain Wrestling excitement. To see us in your town, call Sandy Scott at 703-989-6819. And some of the superstars from Smoky Mountain Wrestling ready for town and ready for action, the Gangsters, coming to Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the Charlotte area.
Charlotte, North Carolina, have you ever seen organized violence? Have you ever seen somebody get beat to death in a ring and can't go to jail for it? Well, you going to see it in the very near future. I know you might be used to seeing Beavers and Butthead, or you might know them as Ricky and Robert the Rock and Roll Express. Or you might even be used to this big, fat, black, greasy junkyard dog, a prehistoric goof. Well, now you going to see the Gangsters, and you going to see us come to Charlotte, and we going to burn that city down. And when it's all over, you got to say, there goes the neighborhood. Ooh.
very proud to have him home, that's for sure. I mean, he's gone through quite an ordeal. We're very lucky to have him alive.
I feel great. It's great to be back home, seeing all my family and friends again, and being walking around here in Virginia again.
Late last year, Terry Allen, or as he is better known, Magnum TA, was at the top of pro wrestling. But a car accident left him paralyzed from the neck down. Ahead was the biggest battle of his life.
Well, 9 months ago, they gave me a 1,000,000-to-1 shot of being a quadriplegic the rest of my life, and I wasn't too happy with those odds. So obviously, I've overcome a lot of things and a lot of turmoil, but it's been a lot of hard work, and I still got a long way to go. But I feel real good about what I've done so far.
Terry Allen spent the day visiting old friends, and he even took the time to stop by his Virginia Beach dentist office for a long overdue checkup. But he also took the time to reflect on the tremendous support he's received from his fans all across the nation.
It was rather overwhelming, especially in the beginning. When I got home, I sorted through letters, and I had some 60,000 letters at my home. And it was just, it was a very warm feeling to know that many people genuinely cared about my well-being.
The 28-year-old Allen works on his rehabilitation 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. His right arm and leg are still very weak. However, he makes progress every day, both physical and mental.
I've learned a great deal about the self-discipline and patience it takes to overcome very frustrating odds. And, when you have doctors and experts and these so-called experts in the field telling you something about your body that you're just unable to accept, telling you that it's never going to work again the way it used to, it takes a great deal of mental concentration to overcome these things. And, you got to say your prayers and you got to believe in the man upstairs, but you got to do the work yourself. And it's been the most trying ordeal I've ever been through.
Allen's goal is to wrestle again. He doesn't know when it will take place, and he knows he's fighting incredible odds, but he says he'll be back. And after what he's achieved, who's to doubt him? John Castleberry, TV 10 Sports.
On the scene in many, many years is 6'5", 420-pound King Kong Bundy, the man from Atlantic City, New Jersey, Devastation Incorporated, and he'll be coming your way soon.
That's right. My name's Bundy, and I'm from Atlantic City, New Jersey, the baddest city in the world. Let me tell you something. I grew up in Atlantic City, not when there was fancy casinos, not when everything was nice and pretty, when everything was dirty and you had to be tough to walk across the street. That's the Atlantic City I know, and that's where I came from. And now I'm coming to the Mecca. That's right, the Mecca of professional wrestling, Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm coming there to see Tommy Wildfire Rich. My partner, Wild Bill, over to me against Tommy Wildfire Rich. And anybody you can find, Rich, with the guts to get in the ring with us. Let me tell you what he's going to get, and let me tell you what you're going to get, Rich. You're going to get the Atlantic City Avalanche, and let me tell you exactly what that is. That's me coming down on top of you, 420 pounds, and it's you taking a 5 count, Rich. No 3 counts. I never give an opponent a 3 count. They always get a 5 count because I don't stand for no crybabies or no weasels running around saying Bundy gave him a fast count. When I beat a man, he knows that he's beat. So you think about it, Rich, and you look all over and you find any partner you can. And let me give you a little piece of advice, boy. He better be big, and he better be tough, and he better be mean, because it's going to be a fight in that Omni. I'm not coming to Atlanta. I'm not coming to Georgia on the 11th to lose or to be a doormat or to go down for anybody, Rich. I'm coming for you. I don't like some sheepdog, some bleach-blind sheepdog running around with a big name on national television. I want the big name because I'm the biggest man in professional wrestling, Rich, and you're going to find all about that the 11th at the Omni.
The King Kong Bundy against Wildfire Tommy Rich tag team action. It should be a great night of action at the Omni on September the 11th.